Good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. We're going to get started in just 1 second. I'm pretty excited about today's training as it relates to RFIs. If you're not following me on LinkedIn, I put out a notice often on LinkedIn, and I talk at different points about, hey, there's 700 or 900 or 1,000 something RFIs that are out there active due in the next 30 days. And for me, I love that because it says that the activity, the engagement between buyer and seller is still happening. RFIs come out in many places. So you can look at SAM, you can look at contract vehicles. If you're not tracking on contract vehicles as a way to hear about RFIs, then you might want to include that in to your world. For example, if you're not on a GSA schedule, you can team up with somebody who is on that schedule and ask them to just let you know when RFIs come out. You guys can team together on a response. But anyways, this morning, same thing. Today is what day is today? 21st of November. And same thing. If you go into SAM right now, you'll find 700 and something sources sought notices, RFIs due in the next 30 days. And for me, as I was preparing for today's training, because I wanted to do training that related to, something relevant, something that was out there right now, as I dug into it, rather than something from months back or years back. Anyways, when I was looking in there, I was able to find lots of RFIs that related to work I might have done as a government contractor. I'm not a government contractor at the moment, but I think there's a lot of stuff in there, and I highly encourage you to browse it. Anyways, we're gonna get rocking and rolling on RFI responses. One thing I realized is that I need to come back with several different trainings, and I might put together a free masterclass. And you guys can let me know if you're interested in this, but a free masterclass that's more like a couple of hours, because I'm going to go through today's training and we're going to talk in 30 minutes about RFIs and my process around shredding an RFI or looking at an RFI and then responding to it. But 30 minutes is not enough time to give you the full path at this, right? So I want to come back multiple times. But today I've got some good opening level process steps that I follow when I go in after an RFI and I want to respond. If you don't know this, and I'll say it again probably in a second in my intro, but I had 2 government contracting businesses, and I would say at least 75 or 70% of my business was won off the RFI. It was either won directly off the RFI with teammates where we were able to push people out and get awards. Or it was won in the RFI because we were able to shape it early and get engaged early with the buyer before most of our competition. And so I've won contracts responding to RFIs. I say that you want to respond to an RFI right to win, right? The idea of responding to an RFI should not be this throwaway exercise. You're not looking at what the government is putting out and putting half-baked or half responses back to them, or just throwing a capability statement. No, I encourage you, if you're going to take the time to respond to an RFI, write for the win, right? As if you want to win that opportunity. Imagine it's an RFP and you're going to write with such a different level. And so that's why I say you can have the similar success I did, where I was able to win contracts and push contracts heavily on the RFI during that market research phase. You can go back and watch a video I did back in 2019 where I showed I helped 4,000 businesses in 2018 do this same thing in the HubZone program. And they were able to push $3 billion more to the HubZone program. And I would tie it down to 90% was the process that I taught them about showing up during market research, the market research phase with the federal buyer. If you show up then you're able to give reasons to the contracting officer to set it aside to HubZone or to think about your approach, et cetera. So it isn't just me. I taught this process to thousands and thousands of businesses, and they followed as well. I don't want to give you a misleading statement either. It's not every RFI. Sales is about winning some and losing some. If you don't know this in baseball, if you're familiar with American baseball at all, hitting a home run 10 out of 10 times is not a great player. A great player is more like hitting the ball 3 out of 10 times or something. And sales is kind of that same thing. As long as you're hitting it out of the park 3 or 4 times out of 10, you've got a good steady process. You can keep improving that process. So not all RFIs are going to win, but you can definitely win by writing to the RFI with a thought towards winning. And then lastly, I put here is that RFIs are the best way to get in the door. This is, I'm very fond of saying statements that are my opinion, that are absolutely fact, or a factual opinion. RFIs are the best way to get in the door for federal buyers. And here's why I say that. First off, you have to compare it to all the other ways. You could knock on a door, right? I've got a meeting in 2 weeks with senior DoD people. That'll be my first time going in. But if I had an RFI that I had responded to, then I would have been able to say so much more to a captive audience. If I go in and have a meeting, they potentially are having a bad day or they interrupt me because they're just conversational. But if I write a response to an RFI, then I am showcasing my company and our capabilities at the highest level, our most favorable light. I have a chance to refine that response to make sure it makes me look good. And so when I send it in, these people don't see any mistakes I make. They don't see me, with my hair messed up, or I mess up my words, or I'm tired, or whatever it is. They see kind of a perfect response from me because I'm writing to what I'm good at. And you do the same thing, right? When you write an RFI response and you're writing about what you're good at, then you're going to be able to get in the door to a federal buyer and impress both the contracting staff and the program office staff, the people who are going to read your response to decide if it's any value to them. And if you write a good response, of course it is. All right, if that's what you're here for today, is get some tips on writing RFI responses to increase your win chances, put RFIs rock in the chat, RFIs rock in the comments. Just let me know you're along for the ride, and I'm going to share three steps that I follow. And again, if you're just getting here, I'm probably going to use this as my first time. Well, actually, I've talked about RFIs at least 100 of the trainings, but I'm trying in 2026 to come back and put this in a little bit more of a step-by-step course thing. And so if you're interested in a masterclass, a free masterclass on RFIs, I'll do that. So today I'm just touching on 3 steps that relate to my process. The first thing is, how do I do an initial review on an RFI? For example, I just looked at SAM and I saw all these opportunities, 600 of them. I just kept going through, browsing through them until I caught ones that caught my eye. I open them in a new tab, and I do that until I get the end of 100 items on a page, and then I look at whatever I open, right? And so I'm going to talk about, of those ones, after I find the one that I like, which I'll show you today, how do I do a review of the material that they put out? Second thing is, what's my process for a page layout? So you have to respond to the government. And sometimes we use templates. Sometimes we use a previous response and bring it in. I don't do that. I'm going to give you a different way of doing it. I think people call it storyboarding. But for me, I just hit the whiteboard kind of thing. And so I'll talk to you about that. And then the third thing I want to cover down on is ways to engage the buyer before you submit. This is a way to warm them up to who you are. We call these marketing engagements, etc. So I'll give you some tips on that. I'm going to try to manage my 22 minutes left on those 3 topics. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, founder of Call Plan AI, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years in the federal market as a small business government owner, and after I got out of the Army, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we have repeatable, predictable results. This is what I want for you. It's why I come back day after day to provide training for you. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, definitely do so. I put out a lot of good content. I shared today an updated org chart for PEO Enterprise in the Army. So if you're in the whole IT world or systems, that might be valuable to you. I haven't planned my training for next week. I always do it over the weekend. So make sure you're connected with me on LinkedIn to hear about that. I'm going to drive pretty fast into today's training because I want to make sure I'm getting a good amount of information out to you. So the first, and I'm going to go through a couple of slides, and then I'm going to go through, I'm sharing my screen, so I'll go through the documents. But I wanted to share, how do I do my initial review of an RFI? If I see an RFI on SAM, let's say, what do I do with it? And admittedly, RFIs come in all different flavors. No contracting officer does it the same way. No contracting officer does it consistently. And rarely do I find any without confusion. Right? Like sometimes we look at it, we're like, what? And I think that's a little bit okay, because the whole idea of RFIs and sources sought is it's market research. It's engaging the seller, us, to have a dialogue around how the government plans on buying and what they plan on buying. So RFI is about the scope, really, and sources sought is about the acquisition details, who they're going to buy it from, how they're going to buy it, et cetera. So the first thing I do is I open up all the documents. In the example I'll show you today, I have 4 documents. There was 4 Word documents attached. And then I just look through them, right? And in a minute, I'll show you how I scrubbed them in there. But I'm looking for 3 main sections of information at this early stage, right? The first thing I'm looking for is key information. I want to know details about the response as quickly as I can, right? I want to see what's the response due, how big is the response, what's the lift on it. For me, how can I really put in a good response in there? And then I'm looking for the 2 main things that I want to be able to address. By the way, key information, another huge one is the task areas, right? It's one thing for me to look at a title and go, oh, okay, I like that. But it's a totally different thing to begin to look at the task areas and go, oh, those are a little bit outside of where I thought I was going to do, or what I thought I was going to do. So the third and the fourth things I look for in these documents is I'm looking for pains and challenges. Because when I write a RFI response, I want to know, why is the government putting this requirement out? What are the challenges they're facing? Whoever the customer is, they always have challenges and they always have some sort of pains. And you can either see them explicitly stated, here's my challenges. And a lot of federal agencies actually put out challenge documents. And sometimes in RFIs, you might see them talking about, we're struggling with this. Other times they're implied. And they're implied either in the language within paragraphs. As you read them, you're like, oh, that sounds like a pain, right? And I'll try to show you some in a minute. And the second thing is, a second way to find pain points is to look at the objectives. So pretty frequently within RFIs, you'll see the government say, this is what we're trying to get done. These are our objectives. That's a little different than the scope of work. The scope of work is laying out the task areas. They're starting to be a little bit more detailed about what they want. But their objectives, it's like, why are we trying to do this? What's going on? Well, for me, I always tie back the objectives to a pain point. Even if they haven't stated, I'm like, well, why would you want that? And you can think about why they would want that or not want that. These are implied pain points. You can see them inside the objectives. I've done a whole nother training about how you understand what the buyer is doing based on what they explicitly say, I want this, and what they're implying, right? When you start reading between the lines, you start seeing it. So this is my first review of it. And then I think I'm going to go through all 3 slides really quick and then switch over to the documents. That way I don't get confused going back and forth or confuse you. So the first step I do is I look at those initial documents, right? I'm doing an initial understanding of the RFI. This is also where I decide, keep in mind, I only looked at a whole bunch of RFIs at SAM. I chose a few that looked right. I picked the one I want to work on. Now that I'm working on it, this is what I'm doing. I'm looking at those documents in there. Now I'm really trying to understand the details. And this is like a 10-minute exercise for me, 15 minutes. When you get good at identifying opportunities that are in your sweet spot, then theoretically this review should be pretty fast. By the way, one thing I'm leaving out of today is any AI tools. Even though Voltron is the sponsor of our lives, I'll talk about them in a minute. I want to leave out the AI part for a second, because human in the loop is a really important thing, and your company. And AI can only assist you in the direction you're going, but you've got to know where you're going. And so the first step is really vetting that RFI you found and making sure it was good. The next thing I do is I create my page layout. This is where I really hit the whiteboard. You can do whatever you want, but I would suggest you do things like have a big whiteboard if you can. Otherwise, if you've got a wall, just if you know how many pages are there, because one of the first things you're going to do is go, how many pages do I have to respond? If you know how many pages are there, then just put the pieces of paper up on a wall like they're sticky notes, but use an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. Don't use a little square. Make it big. And the reason I say this, and I think I'm saying in bullet number 3 there, is you want to free your mind. We are creative creatures, right? People are creative creatures. And when we restrict ourselves down by space, like if we use a sticky note, our whole thinking begins to try to figure out, how can I fit in the sticky note? Compared to if you use this huge, massive whiteboard, or if you have an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper stuck on the wall for every single opportunity. If you get painter's tape and a white piece of paper and stick it on, then you can start going around and you start thinking about, how do we tell a story? Not how do I copy the last RFI response into this one, right? That stuff that you had before is great reusable material, but it should not be where you start. it should help with your RFI response as you're building it. Step number 4, when I'm looking at a response, and today's response you're going to find is absolutely, totally the weird response. But for RFIs, when I respond, I don't have some fancy title page that's going to win awards or look flashy. I take full advantage of page 1. That's where I'm putting my company information. I might even put a paragraph in there at the bottom that is trying to, put that differentiator. If I say, why us? We already know you want to buy this. I'm saying right on that first page, why us? And so it's really important when you look at that first page, maximize the value of it. Rarely have I ever seen somebody say, put a title page with a little image and then put everything valuable inside the document, inside the response, right? So take advantage, your GSA logo, your cage code, your UEIs, all that stuff, just throw it on the homepage or the title page. And you're able to maximize the use of page 1, and you give yourself a little bit more space on the page count. The other thing I do when I'm looking at page layouts, of course, I'm going to sit there and try to figure out, if there's different task areas. I might start with saying 1 page per task area, if that makes sense, right? And if that can work, right? If the page count is much smaller, I'll figure out how to put a couple together or how to weave what I do together. But number 5 here, bullet 5, is I recommend that you have 1 page for recommendations. It could be a last page. It could be the second page. You begin to decide where you want to put it. But here are the recommendations for this response. If you're engaging me with an RFI or a sources sought notice, then I'm going to make recommendations back to you. I might say some of these recommendations on the next page, but right here you see some of them, right, is NAICS code. As a small business, we want the NAICS code to be the lowest threshold. What this means is if there's a way for me to recommend a NAICS code that the dollar value, I'm losing, the size standard is smaller, it means I have lower and lower competition or reduced competition. Because some NAICS codes say you can be a $30+ million company. Others say, let's say 7 million or something. And so I think of things like that in the recommendations, and I'll talk about them more in the next page, I think. But there's a set of questions and recommendations that go on there. One thing I would want is I want to be able to use past performances of my teammates. This opportunity I'm looking at today, it asks me a question. It says, what percentage of the work do you need to subcontract out? And I hate that question. It's a horrible question because it's none and then a couple of percentages up to 50%. It's like, well, I don't need to subcontract this out. I want to. Where's the ability for me to answer that I value teaming so that we spread it across? Anyways, I want to be able to ask certain questions that are standard questions. And I recommend you do the same thing. And you don't have to do it all in the first response you ever write. But if you've been writing for a while, you've got a standard set of questions that are the beginning of shaping the opportunity in the direction you want. An example is if it's TS clearance, do they really all need to be TS clearance or cleared? If it says, if you think the work is going to be done on site, my recommendation is that, like I did software development, I would do this all the time. I would encourage them to do like an 80-20 rule where 20% of my people were on site, 80% were off-site, so then I didn't have to get them cleared. And I would just show them a process for how any software that was developed went through an NSA scan before it ever got into their environment. And for a lot of them, they never even thought about this, right? I'm not trying to trick the government. I'm trying to use data and evidence to make suggestions that are in my favor, but will also work good for them. I'm not looking to make any recommendations that are in my favor that are no good for the buyer, right? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so this is my quick process, is the page counts that are out there and using the whiteboard, right? Keep that in mind. Is I know a lot of us want to go right into our computer, but typing onto a keyboard slows us down. Our mind is moving at 100 times faster than our fingers could ever move. And I don't care if you're 100 words a minute typing, right? Our mind is so creative. It's bouncing over here, and you want to let it do that because you'll get a good response. You'll start thinking about other customers rather than some formal past performance. You're like, oh, wait, for John, we did this thing, and Sally, it was this or something. All right, so let's look at the third slide I have here before I switch over to my the documents is ways I engage. So I'm doing this write-up, and I'm preparing to write up a response. And I'm walking you through that particular part. And by the way, if you're just getting here a little late, I do plan on doing a master class that lays this out much more, because 30 minutes is just too short to try to lay out the whole process step by step. But so the first thing you're doing is kind of shredding that RFI when you find it, and how to really look at it and begin to prepare. Second one was how to begin to look at the response that you're going to do as fast as I can. Within the first hour of finding an RFI, I want to be putting it on the whiteboard. For me, that's my thing. And I want to be mapping it out. But while I'm doing this and I'm thinking about how I'm going to lay out the response, I'm seeing the whole document. And so I'm looking for ways to engage the buyer. You'll see sometimes in an RFI response, you'll see this often. Don't call me, don't email me. I'm like, I don't think you understand what market research means. I don't care that they say that. And I know there's people on here, especially government people, who might go, what do you mean you don't care? Look, I'm a seller, you're a buyer. I'll do me, you do you. But when you tell me not to engage the buyer, and for me to accept it is for me to be irresponsible as a salesperson, right? My job is to figure out how to engage the buyer. Now, you can't be a pest, and you can't annoy them, and you can't be unprofessional. But those aside doesn't mean you can't follow up. It doesn't mean you can't go around them and go find the program office, all those kind of things. But I look for ways to engage the very contracting officer or specialist who has this opportunity out. I'm looking for ways to get back. And the easiest first way to get back to somebody who says, don't send me emails, is to say, hey, thanks a lot. Just want to let you know we're going to respond. That's all you say. And it's like, what are you going to do? Yell at me because I just said that? We're in market engagement. What they don't want is people pushing them or taking up too much of their time. And this is why I mean, make sure you're professional. But send them an email. Let them know you're responding. I bet you'd be the only one who does that. And many contracting officers will appreciate it because they did not put market research out to not engage industry. They didn't put it out just to, for the most part, they didn't put it out just as an exercise. They put it out because they're really trying to do a good job to buy something on behalf of the government. So that response back is a really good one. The next thing I look for, and this is when I'm reviewing the documents, is I'm looking for any inconsistencies or errors. These are ideal chance for me to reach back and say, hey, John, I noticed in the document it said on this page, NAICS code 541-111, and this one it said 541-112. Sorry, just quick email, which is it, right? And when you respond like that, you're able to engage with them. They're tracking who you are, and then you're getting out of their hair, right? This idea of responding. Many of these folks don't put any constraints on it. Don't sit there and say, don't call us, don't email us. And so you can build a list of questions that you have that are standard, and you should think about these. Whether they take them and share them with the entire pool or not is fine, right? You don't ever want to share something with a contracting officer or the federal buyer that is not okay for them to share it out. You're not trying to have backdoor conversations. You're just trying to have conversations. So I like putting together a list of questions that I can come back with them, right? If I don't see that they have determined the set aside, then I will ask flat out. This is what we did with the HubZone firms. Would you be open to setting this aside to HubZone firms if enough of us responded? I'm trying to get them to think about, would they do that? Because sometimes you'd be amazed. They'll come back and say, nah, we're actually kind of thinking this will be an SDVO-SB, Service Disabled Vendor Known SB, right? We're thinking that. Well, shoot, why'd you put that RFI out in the first place, right? But second off, now I know it. Third, I've got it in their head. So you can come up with some of those. If you've got a particular contract vehicle and you only have that one, then I would be asking right away, would you consider setting this aside or using this contract vehicle to get in? Like if you're in the Navy and you go, hey, would you use GSA? They're going to come back and say, no, probably not. We're staying on Seaport. Okay. Well, now you know that you cannot respond as a prime and you can sub, but build those lists of questions so that you can engage with the federal buyers as you go along. Okay, so I think that was the last slide on that. So let me share my screen really quick. So I've got a bunch of documents here. I want to show you that I said first step is for me to review the documents. And let me just bounce really quick. I'm going to show you them in the least amount of pages to the most amount of pages in the next few minutes and what I do. So there's 4 documents. I see additional clauses, right? Generally, you might just blow it off, but I want to come in really quick and just go, is there anything that's a flag to me? So I'm looking at this. It's just saying some basic stuff that I have to be responsible, but there's nothing in here that says, like let's say hub zone preference or whatever. So I just put a note in here saying there's nothing helpful for me on that response. The second document had 2 pages. And this one here was an interesting one. It's an onboarding process. And so when I read this thing, I don't know why it's in the RFI. It's like, theoretically, this is pretty early, but they're talking about how to onboard non-federal users, which doesn't make any sense totally because there's other stuff they're talking about. But I go through this whole thing and I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, this is a little bit of a flag for me. I need to pay attention. And the note I wrote for myself is, can I present someone who's cleared already in USDA? Like, does that give me any advantage in my response? So just looking at this document, I would go through it a little bit more and I would pass it to my HR department or the recruiting folks and say, hey, anybody in our company got this thing? And generally salespeople, they're not totally familiar with all of these or all of the people who work in there. So that's a quick review of that document. Then I went to the, where's the next one? So this one is the RFI document. And let me just do 1 and 2 pages. So there's the first page is that, the last page is that. So there's only 2 pages in here. And if I come in and look at this, it's basic stuff. Introduction is always about the organization. It's not really helpful. The description is horrible in this case, right? I'm looking in here and it really is just generic stuff. It's not a description of the work, which is fine. I just move on, but it's pretty bad. And then I'm coming through here and it's talking again about USDA and it's talking about just their departmental administration office and things it's doing. I actually know USDA pretty well, so I know about these guys, but that's really not the work. The work is all these events they're doing. And that's when I get down to the only section that really matters is I'm looking at the primary objectives. And so I look very quickly in here and I ask myself if this is going to be a good response or whether we can fit in. So I can see this within a couple of minutes that aligns with me. The other thing I can see is that right here, I've got 7 different, let's say task areas. And I have to look at the PWS to see that, but 7 of them that line up in there. And so the last thing is I was looking for the part I wanted to show you is like how I do the page layout, but they don't have a page layout. Instead, they have this form. And I think I want to spend the last few minutes telling you about the form and the PWS. Hopefully you're familiar with those. But this is what they gave me, is this form here. Let me just pull it out 1 second. So this form, and I start going through and I scrolled pretty fast the first time. And I was like, this is nothing. Like, I can't believe that that's the response. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to come talk to you guys about this. But then I realized as I started coming down, and when you answer questions, like here, if I said none, et cetera, that's the last time there was any change. And so it looks like there's nothing. But here it asks, are you using or recommending an existing vehicle? And so when you say yes, then it starts expanding and it's like, oh, choose what type of vehicle? I might say professional services. And then it's asking you to describe stuff in here. And this is where it starts getting fun. And I really want you to pay attention. In here, if I went down, it would still ask me more and more questions. Now here it's starting to talk about past performance. Here's, you can start describing more information. And here it's asking me about the rough order of magnitude. This is something they do to smalls all the time that they really don't do the larges, is in market research. They make us do all this writing. But if you switch it, you go, I have a chance to win the opportunity. What happened here is I went for like 10 fields. Now I'm up at 20. And the thing to keep in mind, and I'm kind of tight on time. I got 2 minutes left. The thing to keep in mind is these fields are unlimited. If you come in here, you can type tens of thousands of characters of a response, which is what I already tried and did, right? That means I have unlimited pages basically to respond because you didn't limit my pages. And some of us might hesitate to do that, but I'm saying if you want to write to the win, you could write to it right here. Number 21, provide feedback on the high level scope. I can go in there and talk about things. And when they look at it, they start sitting back and say, let me call Neil in and have him and his team talk about what's going on. Okay, so I know I'm rushing through that fairly quickly. Where am I going? Let me get back here to my slides. I know it's very fast. If you didn't hear me say this, I am going to figure out how to put together like a 2-hour at least masterclass. Maybe 4 hours if it's really intense and walk you through how I respond. I have written and talked about in training RFI responses that led to contract wins in the RFI phase. And so you can do this as well. The thing I want you to keep in mind, though, from today's training, thank you, Voltron. Say thanks to Voltron in there. Voltron is our AI proposal writing sponsor, which I really appreciate. I'll give them much love later. Remember this, only write your slam dunk opportunity, free your mind to be able to see the response. Just get creative with your response. And then last thing is write for the win. Like I just said, make sure you're writing for the win. All right, I'm out of here because I'm out of time. Remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I will see you in the next training.